And sort of brings up the GST holiday that we're about to implement. Um, and it's obviously food, some alcoholic beverages. As a win for Restaurants Canada and the restaurant industry, how did that sort of come into play? How did that sort of start the conversation with the government?
This is a conversation that we've been having with the government since before my time. So,
Oh,
just to give a little bit of context here, the GST came into effect in 1991, and it was an immediate 7% sales tax on goods and services, and particularly on restaurant meals. And groceries were exempt. And so it created an incentive to not go out to restaurants as much
hmm
and go to groceries more. A massive decline in our market share. So our market share back in 1990 was about 42%. So for every dollar spent on food in Canada, 42 cents of that dollar spent at restaurants, and the remaining 58 cents spent at groceries. And that was in line with what was happening in the US. And then with the impact of the GST, that number dropped to about 38 cents.
Mm.
We have never recovered from. And so when I first started in 1999, so about 25 years ago, a decade later, this was still our top issue as an association. We were still trying to convince government that you have to treat food fairly. You can't have no tax on one type of food and then tax another type of food.
Mm.
So that was just sort of the historical context there. Coming out of the pandemic, operators were still struggling. And as I said, we had 50% of operators not making any money. The government did not extend CEBA. And so a lot of the challenges that came out of that, they were looking for ways to help our industry. And so we had put some proposals together, but they came back to us and said, well, what about a GST holiday? To which we said, this is great. This is absolutely going to be the biggest victory for the food service industry. Even if it's just a temporary fix, it comes at a time of year when people are not going out to restaurants as much. So we see this as being basically injecting $1.5 billion worth of additional spending in the food service industry that was not going to be there before.
Okay.
So absolutely massive.
I've seen a little bit of grumbling, obviously, from the bar industry when it came to what the GST exemption was when it came to drinks. And I get there's a whole bunch of socioeconomic things that go into what was decided on what was going to get the GST holiday when it came to alcohol. Why was hard alcohol sort of like left out? Why was that list down to beer and wine and sake and the coolers?